which is on my list of many places I'd like to see in this world. So I'm grateful. So thank you, Joan, for that. So that's this coming Tuesday at 6 o'clock in Memorial Hall. Again, this is kind of bring and share, bring food and drinks there as well, like we did tonight. So I'm going to hand it off now. And so Ron, do you need a microphone at all? Or?
Well, I'll hang on this one. So what Carlos going to do, are you going to be at the
I can run whatever you need to do.
or at the podium?
I can be there.
Okay, that's the best mic. So if you could comment from the podium, and then anyone who wants to comment on the slide, just raise your hand, and then we'll pass this one around.
Can you guys see okay?
Slow.
Can you see okay?
This
way? Okay.
It's kind of slow.
Okay, so Ron has helpfully provided this map. Oh, Ron's on the phone. Okay. This is a very good map, kind of an overview, and he's organized it by the days that we were there. So this is the first full day. So we landed in Tel Aviv and then went to St. George's Guest House in Jerusalem. But I guess it was actually the travel day that we got in. A bit of a story, though, in that half our group made it on time. The other half, we're at Heathrow Airport in London, and we were on the ground, and in principle, we had like 50 minutes to make it to the next plane, and they just wouldn't let us even do it. British Airways wouldn't allow it. So we missed the connection. And so we had to wait around, I think half the group had to wait around like 9 hours or so. So we got in the middle of the night, the early in the morning the next night, or the next day. So some of us were feeling bedraggled, but also excited and full of adrenaline as we went into the first full day the next day.
May I say something about St. George's? I expected it to be a little room with a bathroom down the hall. Whoa.
It's so our live stream people can hear as well.
I expected St. George's to be, like a shared room with a bathroom down the hall. It was this gorgeous stone building with a beautiful garden outside where we ate. The rooms had air conditioning, private bathroom, TVs. It was just amazing. I just want to say that.
And it was right there to the north of the old city.
So just to give an overview, everybody landed here. We went up to this area, and for the whole trip, we spent time here. We went up to this area, and then we came back down here and spent time in Jerusalem. That was the whole itinerary of the trip.
Yep. So Jerusalem, then up to Nazareth, and then back down to Jerusalem again.
You want to talk about the wall?
Sure. Okay, so the photo on your bottom right, out of those photos there, it's the wall that was first erected in the early noughts, so the early 2000s. And the idea is the Israeli government set it up as a security measure. The thing about it, though, is it really severely separates Israeli and Palestinian communities, first of all. Secondly, there's a kind of an issue as well about some areas where the wall has been placed. It's cut off certain access to water, especially for certain Palestinians. So it's quite controversial. It's 27 feet tall, so it took some effort to get that all set up. But unfortunately, it's just a sad commentary on the state of an area that should be an area of peace, but has been an area of conflict forever. Anyhow, you'll see some close-up photos later on of the wall. And that's our fearless group there. The gentleman in the middle, wearing the red chasuble, that's the Archbishop of the Diocese of Jerusalem. Hossam Naum is his name. And I know him personally because I was at Virginia Theological Seminary 5 summers ago when he came, and he was defending his Doctor of Ministry dissertation. And he passed, so he's a doctor, but his dissertation is on the role of women in ordained ministry in the Holy Land. And up to this point, women have been forbidden from being ordained and practicing either being a deacon, priest, or bishop. So, he wrote this before becoming bishop. He was a canon then. So it's a real gutsy move for him to do that. Okay, first meal, I'm going to let somebody else, whoever wants to comment on that.
Well, Brett's first in line.
No. Any commentary? Or go ahead, Ron.
This is kind of a typical meal. Usually it's like 2 courses. It's the first course of the hummus, yogurt, which you got to have tonight, fresh vegetables, and bread. And that bread is, I don't know how to pronounce that, kayak? Is that correct? Kayak? But it's made in a loop, and it's very
Right there on the
cool.
right side.
Yeah, but we love that bread.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a dish called upside down maklube. Maklube.
Hence the upside down part.
So the guy in the light blue shirt,
It's cauliflower. It has potatoes and carrots.
the guy in the light blue shirt is Cousin Iyad. He was the tour guide for the whole group.
Yep.
He's a wonderful man.
You'll see him later on, and we'll point him out. So yeah, so Betsy was talking about how wonderful the facility is where we stayed. Actually, it's a guest house, right where the cathedral is, and very old style. These stone archways and so forth, and high ceilings. But it also had an extensive courtyard between the areas where the halls where the rooms were. And so it was great just to be able to come, like at the end of the day, and we're tired and everything, but we get to recap a bit of the day with each other and catch up with one another.
Well, this was the American colony. This
Yeah,
was a
some of us
hotel
went out to the
next
American
us,
colony, right.
And we all went out for drinks. How can you tell? We're all laughing and joking. But this was next door to St. George's down the
Right.
street, a little bit of ways.
Right.
And it was wonderful. We had the whole courtyard to ourselves.
Yep. But that whole courtyard living thing was just big. We have that here in a way, but it's big over there too.
Just a side note is this hotel was the site of one of the first American colonies in Jerusalem, and it was started by a man who lost his children on the trip over to Europe. It was a boat accident, and he wrote the words to "It Is Well With My Soul."
Oh,
If you guys know that tune.
yeah.
Yeah. He wrote the words, and then his friend wrote the tune. But it was It Is Well With My Soul was about him losing his kids, but he and his wife still recovered and still formed this American colony in Jerusalem, which is in existence today as it's a children's, some sort of a children's, like daycare or something that caters to Palestinian children in Jerusalem.
And where this was located, we were just north of the wall surrounding the old city of Jerusalem. So literally just north, about a maybe 5 or 10 minute walk to get to the old city. Okay, that's inside St. George's Cathedral. So we would have our morning prayer or communion each day. There he is, Archbishop Hossam Naum. He says here, there's a note there, he also oversees the Episcopal Al-Ahli Arab hospital in Gaza. And Ron pointed out it was hit by a missile strike on October 17th, so there was damage there.
The diocese includes Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. So
Right, so 5
he
areas.
has congregations in all of those places.
Right.
And the hospital that we oversee, the Episcopal Diocese there overseas, is the only hospital in Gaza that has been continually operating throughout this whole war.
I didn't realize that. Okay, thank you.
Can I say something about the cathedral?
Mm-hmm.
On the way out of the cathedral, if you took the left-hand exit,
against the wall, there were 1,000 cranes. And I just thought, how cool was that to see this cultural reference in this holy place in Jerusalem?
Hold that back.
Did you take a picture? Right now.
Okay, so day 2, overview of day 2, Mount Scopus in the Judean desert and Herodian. So we've got this sign here in 3 languages, Hebrew, Arabic, and English. And so the West Bank, where most of our travels occurred, following in the footsteps of Jesus, so, in that area, but divided into areas A, B, and C. And so there's some notes here. Palestine Authority controls Area A, and Israelis are not allowed. B is under joint control. Both are allowed. C is Israeli-controlled, and Palestinians are only allowed there by special permission. And as it points out there, our guide is licensed by, he's a Palestinian Arab Anglican, and he's licensed by both the Israeli government as well as the Palestinian Authority to be able to give tours. So he's got access all over the place.
Yeah, and we were entering Area C, which was Israeli-controlled, and Palestinians are only allowed by special permission. And, is that right? Oh, I'm sorry. We were entering Area A, which is Israeli citizens are forbidden. And your friend, Mr. Fox,
Right.
was a little bit nervous because he's Jewish, right?
Well, thankfully it says Israeli and not Jewish.
Yeah.
On the sign. Because he's an American.
Look what it says. It says, entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden.
Against the Israeli
Dangerous
law.
to your lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. Okay, Mount Scopus overlooking the Judean desert. So we're at the south. We're south of Jerusalem at this point. The whole half of the Holy Land, the southern half, is complete desert. So it's a Negev desert. But you have some wonderful views from there. Herodian. We'll get into the other slides in a moment about Herodian. But it's from up there. It's like a mountain, a man-made mountain, as it were. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But from there, you get these fantastic views. Yes. Yeah, so that photo on the bottom right from Mount Scopus and from that area, tall buildings are Jewish settlements. So you have these Jewish settlements that, again, are separate from where Palestinians can go to and so forth. So it's, but just to show, there'll be that, and then next to that will be a Palestinian area which looks much more rundown than what that appears. Okay, so you're going to see a lot of food in these slides, okay, and that's all right. We like food. By the way, those of you who brought food tonight, thank you. And there was a lot of Israeli and Palestinian offerings tonight. So we went to this restaurant, the Orient Restaurant, and the thing about it, there was a demonstration there on how they fix their food, how they heat their food up. This is an oven made from the soil there, made from the mud, and they'll get the food ready, put it in a rack, put it in there, and then seal up the front. And then it cooks for a while, and then after a while they take it out, and then they unseal it, and then take it out again. Eod, our guide, made an allusion to how burials happened in Jesus' time. And as you can imagine, with so much desert and so forth, the ground is so hard that it can be hard to dig in, and so people would often get buried in caves. And they would take over a part of a cave and so forth. And so it showed how, if you could imagine the oven like a cave, as it were, how then people would then cover the cave. And in that sense, that's how burials happen.
If you look on the right-hand side, that's a closed-up oven. And when the food's finished cooking, they'll open that up and serve it to us.
You see that just to the right, that left photo, but the right side of that left photo. Okay, that's on the way to Herodian, King Herod's palace. Remember King Herod from the Christmas stories, and he's jealous that this king of the Jews has been born, and he thought he was the king of the Jews, and so he ends up trying to kill all the boys 2 years old and under in the area trying to get at Jesus, and thankfully the Holy Family escaped. But that was one of his palaces. Okay. Okay, so you see the mountain. It's, it looks like almost like a natural mountain, but it's really human-made. You see how there are elements integrated into the mountain. You see the amphitheater on the kind of the bottom center, right, kind of off center a bit. There's an amphitheater there, and other things. There's a ramp going up, stairs going up to the top as well. Lots of stairs. We worked off all that food that we were eating, by the way. I found I even lost weight, believe it or not, despite all I was eating. Did you as well? Yeah. Okay, so there's the amphitheater, the mausoleum as well. So from the top, and on the right there's what's called a mikvah. Mikvah is a Hebrew word to do like a pool, kind of a pool, a purification pool. And so that was there as well.
Yeah, so this was like the baths that they had, and they had steam rooms. In that little tiny hole, the steam would go out of there, but they had hot water piped into it. It was a pretty intricate, interesting system. Yeah.
They were pretty ingenious. I mean, there, and Masada is another place. We didn't get to go to Masada, but that's further south, but where these kind of fortresses on mountains, somehow they would finagle a way to get water up there in the desert. And so it was pretty amazing.
Better enemies.
So we're inside the mountain here.
Hey, Suzanne, look good.
All right.
Good job, Sarah. Going.
I can do it. See you later.
Great. Made it.
There's our guide, Iyad. He just showed him, just right at the end there.
Better enemies.
He is. He's a canon of the cathedral, yeah. Okay, day 3. So this was the day we got into the old city of Jerusalem. And you see on the map how there's this wall around that old city area. Much of Jerusalem, by the way, is built beyond that, right? Modern Jerusalem is built to the west and north around that and so forth. That wall was built only in the 1500s, so not in Jesus' time, but in the 1500s, when the Ottoman Empire took over the Holy Land. Suleiman the Magnificent got and those walls are still up, and you can even walk on the parapets and the top there. You can walk around and see some great sights that way.
So just about a quarter of a mile up this road is where St. George's Cathedral is, where
Right.
we stayed. You could walk down there very easily in a few minutes, and you can see the Dome of the Rock, the Western Wall. I'm trying to remember all of the. I'm blanking out here.
Garden Tombs up there, just north of the city, old city.
I was too close to it. I can't.
It's okay.
But this is not a big area.
Right.
I mean, you can walk across that whole thing in a few minutes and be out the other gate. It's
Well, the whole-
very concentrated.
The whole Holy Land is about the size of Delaware, so I mean yeah. And just to say that where we were staying in East Jerusalem, that's technically part of the West Bank area. I mean, that's the Palestinian-controlled area. So there we go through the Damascus Gate, which is the northern gate to get into the old city. So there's the wall, and some good views there.
The lower right-hand corner is the broad wall that was being somewhat excavated by archaeologists at the time, because it dated back to 700 BCE, built by Hezekiah. So there are some really old walls.
Right.
The ones that are visible and in existence today are pretty much built by the Ottoman Suleiman the Magnificent in the 1500s.
Okay, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I like how Ron described it, where Jesus was crucified, entombed, and resurrected. We think, but it's a strong assumption that that's where it all happened, because back then this would have been outside of the city walls, and when you either executed people or buried people, that had to be done outside of the city walls. So in Jesus' time, this would have been outside the city walls, and so inside of this, you've got this church here where you've got both. You go up a series of stairs, you get to the top where Jesus' cross would have been inserted into a hole at the top of Mount Calvary. And so once we were inside, we got to go up and touch the hole, and over it is very ornate, and there's an altar over it and everything. So it's kind of hard to imagine that was a hole, but there you go. And then, of course, near there, you've got where his body was laid on a rock afterwards, after he passed away. And then you've got another area where his tomb, where he was resurrected. Again, that tomb is very ornate, and it's hard to realize that. And so there's a slide later on when we get to it, which shows some other tombs that are also in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it would have looked more like what it would have looked like in Jesus' time.
So Father Bob Carter is going to come and talk about the ladder.
Yeah, the story of the ladder.
The immovable ladder, it's you can see it here. It's only got 5 rungs, and you can see it here.
There it is there too.
They just a few days before we arrived, someone had either a priest or a deacon or some member of these congregations. First of all, the whole Church of the Holy Sepulchre is actually owned by 6 different Christian communities: Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Syriac,
The Ethiopian.
2 different Ethiopian,
Right,
Armenian,
right.
and then Ethiopian Orthodox and Coptic Church. And someone, just about a week before we arrived, what they did under the Sultan, the Muslims would require a toll to be paid for any Christian who would enter the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They controlled the front door. They didn't control inside. They controlled the front door. So they exacted a toll every time. And so the priests who went in got around that by, once they got in, they stayed in. And they had food brought to them and so forth. And this window was the window through which they would get fresh air, they would get sunlight and so forth, and food presumably would be brought in through that window and so forth. About a week before we arrived, one of those who stays in the church in order to protect his community's little niche of this church was sitting outside on the ledge in the hot sun, and he moved the ladder 18 inches in order to get out of the sun. He was just sweltering. Moved it 18 inches. 20 men descended upon him and beat him so badly that he had to be taken to the hospital. Oh. And that's how seriously they take these different parts of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the territorialism of that.
I'm going to ask Father David, could you... Oh, go ahead first.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you finish up and then I'll hand it over.
Well, basically what happened in 1728, if I'm not mistaken, there were 2 different things. One happened at 1728 and one in 1759. But basically, the latter was included in a proclamation by the Sultan that nothing must change. There were several things that were, Muslims were allowed into holy Christian sites, but they weren't allowed to establish a residence within a holy Christian site. And as far as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, nothing was allowed to be changed. Status quo. Nothing should change. And the ladder was specifically mentioned. So we know the ladder has been there since around 1756 at the latest. Is that
Some ladder of some sort, yeah. I'm going to ask Father David also to add to that and just share about the key to the whole place.
So,
and who controls that?
So all of these different religious groups have their little portion of the Holy Sepulchre site. And by the way, if you read the history of it, they fight regularly. I mean, not verbal fights.
And these are Christian denominations within one
because
building.
Somebody did something that stepped on somebody else's toes. Interestingly enough, the key to the door is in the hands of a Muslim family that has had the key to the door for well over a century. They open the door every morning and close the door at night with the key. The people who are inside, the priests and all that are inside, do not have access to that key.
Yeah. And you can see how tall the door is over the people. You can see it's 3 times as tall as the people, right? The keyhole is right at the top. The keyhole is right at the top. And the ladder is hidden right behind that pillar. And they pull that ladder out every morning before dawn, climb up, a Muslim unlocks the door and allows the Christians in.
I just find that story so amazing because you do have these instances of people who, are going across religious and ethnic lines to cooperate together. Now, it may seem a little stilted. You got this one family controlling the door and these, Christian denominations in their own area and so forth. But nevertheless, it's quite striking. And, the Holy Land had been under Muslim control for like 800 years or so, until the British right before World War II. So, and yet, Christians and Jews were both allowed to worship freely in their holy sites during that time. Okay, this is, now we had to climb up some very narrow steps inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to get to this point. You can see Father David's right there by the altar, and below the altar is a hole. And you put your hand in the hole, and that is the hole where Jesus' cross had been inserted into the top of Mount Calvary. So that's why people go up there. They line up, they wait for quite a while to get there, they touch the hole, commune there, pray, and then go down some other stairs.
Jen's standing below us. Yeah. Where the actual rock is.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and say it. See Jan on the bottom right there? She's standing back down on the ground level, the original ground level, and you can see behind her, behind some glass, there's part of Mount Calvary. And so that's what you see. And so that's what's all underneath that ornateness that you see where Father David is on the left side. Underneath that is a complete desert-like mountain, and that's where she's standing.
That's my mother-in-law, Marianne.
By the way, the toughest pilgrim in the lot.
Yeah.
90 years old. She was trucking, no complaints. She was just trucking. It was amazing.
And there's the youngest one, Jan.
There you go. So even though this doesn't look like what you might imagine in terms of where Jesus was hanging from the cross and all that, because of all the ornateness around it, we're pretty sure this is the spot. There's another spot not far away called the Garden Tomb, which is to the north of the Old City, which looks more like what you would expect, but for various reasons, scholars don't think that's the original place where Jesus was. Okay, so this is, again, inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Episcopal. So you've got the dome on top, and I love how that sunlight shines down on that, from that dome and down onto what's called the Episcopal, which is where they think Jesus was actually entombed. So there's a tomb in there, and of course, then they built that structure around it, and then of course they built the whole church even around that. So it's hard to imagine, again, it's hard to get your mind around, here's a tomb like a cave inside a rock, but that's what it was back in Jesus' time.
What does the word Episcopal mean?
I think just where he's buried, the burial area. It's a special building. Well, I think it's that special building that was
I think
built.
it's an architectural term that refers
Yeah.
to that.
That
kind of
smaller building there.
octagon, building.
And there's the entrance to the right.
We were not able to enter it because just as we got there, there were specific prayers that went on.
Right.
And one of the Orthodox group closed the doors and they were doing their special prayers inside, so we weren't able to
Right.
go in the Episcopal.
Okay, the stone of unction. So again, so you see in the back, there's that wall, and you look up. That's the top of Mount Calvary, where that hole that I talked about, where the cross would have been inside the hole. That's up there. So you come down, and then you're at street level again. There's that rock, that flat rock, and they think that's where Jesus' body was laid out. It's part of the preparation before he was entombed. So people venerate that as well.
What you see are people praying, but they're also rubbing things on the rock with oils, right, to kind of remember that his body was anointed there with oils as well.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, that's a good point.
If you look at the picture, it looks kind of rocky but it's extremely smooth when you go, and you'll see everyone comes and prays and rubs their hand on it, but it is a very smooth rock where they're
2,000 years of touching the rock, man, to smooth it down. Okay, so after we had gone in and we looked around a while, we went, Eod, our guide, took us to the back of the church, and you see a series of tombs in there, these caves. And that would have looked more like where Jesus was entombed at the time. So we were back there, and we had a kind of a moment of worship and reflection there. And again, people couldn't just bury people in dirt because the dirt was so hard, so that's why they used caves. Interestingly, Jesus was born in a cave. He was entombed in a cave. Okay, the holy flame. So Eod, our guide, spontaneously gave me a bunch of these fragrant candles, little thin candles that were all rubber band together as a pack. And put it against a light, a flame, and so the whole thing was lit. And told me to go to everybody in the pilgrimage, and then people could put their hand over it, or even, and what many of the local people would do is put it all like right up to their chin and go all over and not be burned at all. So you'll see some of that here.
So the symbol of this is done on Easter, at the Easter celebration. They come forth with this flame, and people begin to light candles to this flame. And interestingly enough, this spreads all over the Mediterranean world. People will get this flame and then drive it 60, 70 miles
Got like an Olympic
to
torch.
Nazareth, and they'll drive it over into Jordan, and they'll drive it down into Egypt. It just goes all over as people take this flame to their own places of worship to share.
That's a good point. Okay, after that, we're still in the old city of Jerusalem. We walked to another quarter. The old city is divided into 4 quarters: an Armenian quarter, a Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, and Jewish quarter. Thank you. And so this was I believe it's in the Christian quarter near the Jewish quarter. And so we went to St. Mark's Syrian Orthodox Church. And the deal with that is, what Ron wrote in there is true. It was built over the site of the Last Supper. So most likely, we read in the Gospels that they were in the upper room the Thursday night before Good Friday. And that room, that building was owned by, it doesn't say so directly in the Gospels, but we think it was owned by Mark's family. And so that's why they had a connection to be able to have their Last Supper, their Seder meal there.
So Eod continually said to us that if you want to see the old stuff, you have to go down, not up. So going down to the caves, going down to these subterranean places, because over centuries dirt has been piled on top and the elevation has raised. But this was the Armenian church, and we had a wonderful time with a deacon there who preached at us really well.
Very good, yes.
Yeah, and as you can tell, the women had to wear scarves whenever they entered a church.
Yeah.
So.
Especially Christian sites, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can tell, but the priest there is holding up an Armenian plaque. We'll show it in the next picture. But it's in Aramaic, which is the language of Jesus. And that's what this church studies, right? Aramaic.
Now, St. Mark's makes a bold claim because Jesus taught his disciples there it's the first church in Christianity. Okay. Maybe so. Probably so.
It says that on the wall there.
Well, if it says it, I guess that's it. No, I have no reason to doubt. I mean, that's fine. Okay, there's the Aramaic right there on the right.
This is a picture of the Lord's Prayer in original Aramaic, and this man who's holding the book was doing that calligraphy to write it, and then he recited it for us in original Aramean, which was very wonderful.
And remember, that was Jesus' language too.
Yes.
Jesus' disciples, they all spoke Aramaic.
Can I add on that?
Mm-hmm.
So this gentleman is a priest in this order, and because it was COVID and he was all shut down, he decided to translate the whole New Testament into Aramaic.
Okay, so we're in, again, this old quarter area, and the Jewish quarter. And what's interesting about this is up above is today's street level. It's about maybe, I don't know, what would you guys say, about 15 feet up or something like that?
25.
20, okay. So down here, though, is the original street level in Jesus' time, the Roman time, when Jesus was there. And so you've got these Roman columns there and so forth. And so that's why that's so interesting. And you see that mural behind Ron and Marion over there. That's a mural depicting what that street would have looked like with the columns at that time. And isn't there, as I recall, is there something funny in there? Isn't there like a kid drawn in there or painted in there who's from our time, like a modern, like wearing a baseball cap and
Something like that. This is called the Cardo.
Cardo,
And
which means the heart.
Cardo, I think, if I remember right, in Latin is the east and west. And then there's another name for the north and south of the main street in a city.
Right.
So later on, when we went to Sepphoris up in Galilee area, there is a Cardo there that we were looking at.
Yeah. All Roman towns and villages had cardos.
Yeah.
Okay, so day 4, which I think was on Saturday, if I recall. So we were making our way we spent 3 nights in Jerusalem, where that lower circle is. We're going to be heading up to that upper red circle, and that's the Galilee area, and specifically Nazareth. And so we were making our way, and so to get out of Jerusalem, we rode our coach down to, on the right, or kind of, you see where the river is? See, there's the Sea of Galilee, there's the Dead Sea, and then there's the Jordan River right there. It goes from north-south. So we're in Jerusalem. We made our way down to Jericho, and it's quite a ways to, it doesn't take long by coach at all, but about 25, 30
miles.
minutes. How many?
12 miles from Jerusalem.
So it's about 20, 25 minutes to get down there.
Yeah.
But the incline is very steep, and you can imagine for travelers back in biblical times, what they would do is they need to stay close to bodies of water, right, in order to maintain themselves as they were traveling. And so if they were coming down from the north, from Nazareth or Galilee or somewhere, they'd go down via the Jordan River, so they would have a constant water source, and then come up from Jericho to Jerusalem. And so that's why in the Gospels, when you read about people going up to Jerusalem, they don't mean Jerusalem's in the north. They mean literally it's uphill to get to Jerusalem.
Also in biblical times, this area all in here was the area of Samaria, where so a lot of Jews would not travel through Samaria. They would come down and go up along the river to get back up to Galilee because they thought it would contaminate them to walk through Samaria. Interestingly, Jesus meets the woman at the well in Samaria and stays there 2 days.
Yes. What that reminds me of is how I believe sometimes conflicts and wars and stuff can be generational, meaning the actors might have been different back in time, but it's amazing that if you look at a map of where the West Bank is now, it largely corresponds to what the Samaritan territory.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
And the Samaritans actually came from the time of the 10 tribes that were conquered by Assyria in 721, and they were the Assyrians brought in foreigners to settle, and so they mixed and they kind of lost the purity.
Right.
And that's where Samaria came from.
There's just a lot of animosity between Samaritans and
there's still
Judeans.
Samaritans
back in the
today
day.
worshiping
Right.
in their traditional faith.
Right. So we were on our way down from Jerusalem, going toward Jericho to make our way up north. And on the way down, we stopped here. Iyad had us stop here. Sunrise. So we had left while it was dark, and then by the time we got there, the sun was rising. But just look at that. Isn't that a gorgeous picture? And in the desert, there's not a lot of vegetarian in that particular desert. You see a little bit in the front there in the foreground, but on the whole, there's not a lot. But it's just so stark and quiet. And it was wonderful. We had a chance to have time to ourselves just to kind of commune with God and nature, I guess for something like 20 minutes maybe. And then after that, we had a Eucharist service together. I think there's some photos coming up of that. But here's the video here. And they call it Wadi Kelt. A wadi is like a riverbed or a stream bed that's usually dried out, but then when it's raining, then it'll get water through it.
That's the wadi right there.
There you go.
Trees down
And see the vegetation? That means there's water down there, obviously.
And up on the far left is Jerusalem. So most probably Jesus walked up that wadi.
Yes.
It was a traditional Roman road to get from Jericho area back up to Jerusalem.
And Jesus' story of the Good Samaritan would have occurred here as well.
Maybe.
The little kids there that you see selling things, those are Bedouin kids. And they are brought up, I guess, from a very young age to sell goods to tourists to make money for their families. And I think we bought quite a few trinkets from them.
They are. One little boy, though, I was walking, and you came to a part where you had to go around a ledge. And my eyesight's not great, so I couldn't go any further. So I stopped and backed up. But I wasn't in a very secure place. I was a little nervous. And all these little boys were around. I asked one of them, I said, will you take my hand and walk me back to level ground? And he did, and he put this bracelet.
Oh.
He put this bracelet on my, it's to ward off evil. But they were wonderful. And
Yeah.
they were.
Totally hospitable folks.
So their word for greeting is shalom. Shalom? Shalom? Shalom.
Hebrew,
And
yeah.
I was teaching them, well, where I come from, it's aloha. So I was teaching them to say aloha. And by the time we left there, they were all saying aloha.
Some cross-cultural education there. That's good. Yep. So there's more shots there.
Beautiful area.
Yeah. Again, this was early morning, like 6:30, maybe something like that. Okay, here's the Eucharist, and you see our own Suzanne there on the left, and Father Mark on the right. Just wonderful. What you know, and a very touching moment on the trip.
Brent, the famous camel.
Hey! Yes, there they are. Or Curtis?
Very short.
Yeah.
Did he smell? No. No. I was surprised he didn't smell.
Okay, so so imagine we've already made our way up to the north there, so you see that circle there. That's where we are now. And so, again, in one sense, the Galilee area is not a very large area, but you have to remember people didn't have cars or buses or anything, so it would have seemed a lot further for them than it does for us. But that's the day. This is on Sunday. So we made our way to the north shore of Lake Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee. It's say it's a sea. A, it's freshwater. B, it's the size of a lake. So, But there it is. Okay. And so a lot of where Jesus operated, as you see on the right-hand side, a lot of where he operated was within that triangular area to the north of the body of water. And there's a slide coming up where we had planned on renewing our baptismal vows by standing in the Jordan River. And so where we'll end up will be where that number 1 is, where it says Bethsaida. Near there, maybe a little before that, you see how the Jordan River empties into the Sea of Galilee at that point, before resuming again at the south side of the Sea of Galilee toward the Dead Sea. That's where we did our renewal baptismal vows. But again, my best friend Eric from high school, his wife came to me, Sherry, and about 2 days before and said, I've never been baptized, even though she was raised in a different denomination, but never been baptized. Would I baptize her? And A, I felt incredibly privileged she would even ask that, but B, I thought, oh no, what if I step on some toes here? Do I have the jurisdictional authority? And yada yada. And I asked Iyad, our guide, a canon at the cathedral, mind you. And so he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Go ahead." So based on his authority as a canon of the cathedral, I went ahead and did it anyhow. Okay, so primacy of St. Peter, the church built on the rock. Remember, Jesus gives Simon a new name, which is Peter, and Peter means rock from the Greek. And you think Dwayne Johnson's the rock? Well, we had a different person who was the rock 2,000 years ago. And so this church is made of that rock, and this on this site because after Jesus' resurrection, you might remember that he kept appearing to his disciples in various places before his Ascension Day, 40 days after Easter. And this was one of the spots here on the lake shore where he's cooking fish for the, Peter and his friends are out on the boat. They can't catch anything, and somehow Jesus is there and helps them catch a lot of fish, and then he's cooking the fish and all that. This is the spot for that.
This is called the Church of the Coals, colloquially, because of Jesus built the campfire out of coals and cooked fish, but its official name is the Primacy of St. Peter.
And you see
Beautiful windows inside.
You see where it is in relation to the lake. Yeah. Okay, here we are. So beginning of some photos. So this is actually in the lake, in the sea. There we are standing there, some others standing there, all of us standing there. Okay, so we went to, says the house of St. Peter. So this is a church, and it's built, I don't know how they got permission for this. This is the Roman Catholic Church. In the 60s, somehow they got permission to build this church structure over these archaeological digs. Literally, it's floating. It's like, some people might derisively call it a spaceship or something, because it kind of looks like that. But it's literally floating on those pillars above some dugout areas of archaeology. And so they reckon it's built over Peter's house. And you might remember the story from the Gospel of Mark where Jesus is teaching at Peter's house, and then a couple of things happen. One story is that these friends of a guy who was paralyzed were trying to get him to Jesus so that Jesus could touch him and heal him, but they couldn't get in because of the crowd. And so they literally dug out Peter's roof and lowered him. Can you imagine Peter's dismay? I'm sure. Lowered him right down to Jesus, and then, of course, Jesus healed him and forgave his sins. But another incident happens where Peter's mother-in-law is very ill, very sick. And so Peter, and in fact, that's our gospel story tomorrow, so I can't give too much of the game away. Sorry, a week later. It's a week later. A week from now. But I don't want to give too much away. But basically, Jesus heals her, and then she gets up and starts to serve them. So anyhow, that's there at that point.
So this here is an ancient synagogue that has been, and in the picture, this is right over here, next to these ruins. That synagogue is from the time of Peter and has been partially restored.
Yep.
So one other thing about that Peter Church.
So this House of St. Peter, it's a stylized net, as in a fishing net, because Jesus said, I'll make you fishers of men. So the idea was that is supposed to be a floating net above the
thank you.
archaeological digs.
Thank you. That's good tidbit there. Okay, so this is Tabgha, Church of the Multiplication. So there's our very own Marion there on the right with a St. Peter's fish, tilapia, actually caught in the sea there, in the lake. And it's good. It's really good. It's fried fish. They fry it. It's really good. You see in the middle, there's a baptismal font. And so you see the shape of the cross there in a deeper section, presumably. People can either be sprinkled or I think even immersed. I mean, it's large enough for that to happen as well.
So this church was originally built in about 300, one of the earliest Christian churches. It was enlarged around 400, and these mosaics, interestingly enough, on my t-shirt.
Oh yeah, you got to show the shirt.
These mosaics were found in 1880 because this site had been lost for like 1,300 years, and in around 1880 they did excavations and they found these mosaics in the floor, and since then have built this church over the footprint of the original church, which is mentioned. There was a Spanish woman named Egeria who traveled through the Holy Land at about 380, and she talks about this church in her diary.
Wow. And notice the symbolism on David's shirt as well as in the photograph there, where you've got fish, but you've also got something else in the basket. What's in the basket? Does anybody know? Loaves. Yeah, loaves of bread. Yeah. Okay, so there we are at the Jordan River. As you can see, we're not talking about the Mississippi or something like that, or even Wailua River. It's rather small, at least at this point.
Susan is adamant that it's a creek.
Well, you gotta promote everything over there, right? It's not a lake; it's a sea, and so not a river; it's a stream. But so that's where we were. Fairly muddy getting into it, but that's okay. And so part of it, I think that's Allison Dingley there on the left, who's sprinkling everybody with water from the Jordan River. So that was part of what was done for that occasion. Again, this is that Sunday morning. That's good. Okay, and here we are. So like I said, we had the renewal of vows first, and then Sherry there, she wanted to be baptized, so baptized her, and then Theo is there on the left, and he also, he came up and wanted to be baptized, so we got him done as well.
Theo's mom is right here.
Right, Betsy's Theo's mom.
Theo's getting married.
Yay!
By the way, at the end of the baptism, there was a fish that jumped out of the river, so watch for that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Sorry.
Just watch it.
And of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh yeah. Got God's amen on the occasion. There you go. Fish was happy too. All right. Okay, then later we went to the Mount of Beatitudes. Iyad told me to go up myself up there with no microphone, just with something to read. And everybody else was back down at the street level, fair distance away, and just asked me to not to yell, but just speak in a normal tone of voice and do the reading, the Beatitudes. And so I did. And it was just to show how you can use nature to magnify sound, and Jesus would have done that. So maybe Jesus did some of his teaching from that particular spot or a spot like it. He also did teaching on water on the Sea of Galilee. And again, sound carries over water.
Maybe it was the cave behind you that amplified the sound.
I think so.
But if it wasn't for all the cars that were going back and forth, we could have heard you just fine.
Right.
And we were a fair distance away from you.
I mean, yeah, quite a ways away. So closer to the lake, there's the Church of the Beatitudes. So there it is there. Okay, day 6. So I think this is the Monday, I believe. So we stayed in Nazareth. We stayed at the Sisters of Nazareth guest house, which was a convent there, and obviously accommodation for us. Wonderful, wonderful facility, wonderful place. So here it is, some pictures of where we stayed. As you can see, just gorgeous. It even had a rooftop area on the bottom photo there. And we'd have an occasional meeting or something up there. Yeah, maybe is that in the next slides? Yeah, okay. So the Sisters of Nazareth, where it's built over a series of caves and connections, and kind of labyrinthine connections and hallways and whatnot. That when we went down there, we were standing at what would have been ground level at the time of Jesus. So Jesus, remember, he grew up in Nazareth, and so the Holy Family most likely would have gone through this area. Maybe they didn't live there, but they certainly were familiar with it. It would have been part of the traffic of the area at the time.
Nazareth would have been probably 300 people.
Right.
It was a small village at the time that he grew up there.
Yeah.
And the lower right-hand corner picture is a stone that has grooves in it. And what that was from ropes that were used
right
to
here.
pull water from a well down below. And, the ropes would rub against the stone in the same place. And it just made these grooves. So those grooves gotta be from, Jesus' time.
Yeah. So more shots, you see how system of caves and whatnot. But this was a special surprise, so nobody knew we were going to get to go see this, and it's not hugely public knowledge, but the sisters will allow certain groups to go down in there.
One of the highlights of the trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was talking with one of the nuns at the Sisters of Nazareth, because I was taught all my life by nuns, and she said that when they first bought that property, it was relatively expensive, and they asked the woman, why are you charging so much? And she said, it's because of what's under there. And she said that the sisters did a lot of the building themselves, and when they excavated, they found all of that,
Wow.
and where they believe Jesus, Mary, and Joseph lived.
Wow. So you see it. There's Joseph's tomb. You see it. See the door. The wheel door. So that's, of course, we'll hear more about that with Jesus's burial as well. Okay. So now, even downtown Nazareth is kind of a tight area even now. And so where we were staying, we could easily walk to the Church of the Annunciation. By the way, there are two churches of the Annunciation in Nazareth. This one is the Roman Catholic Church, or the Latin Church. There's another one controlled by the Greek Orthodox. Some about to the north a little bit from this point, where there's a well inside of in the basement of the church, and they think that's where women at the time would have gone and drawn water out. And so, but the reason this church is here, the Latin Church, is because they reckon that this is where the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary. This would have been Mary's home. And the way it's arranged on that photo to the right, it's, first of all, it's a magnificent structure, and I like the airiness in the room, but if you look kind of down left, you'll see kind of an archway, stone archway, and in there is they think that's where Mary lived, or Mary and her parents lived. And so that the angel appeared to her there. And so the whole church is built kind of around, there you go. This is kind of built around that area. Excuse me. Yes, there it is, right there. Yeah.
So that would have been Mary's ancient home.
Yeah, I think so. Or like her childhood home. Yeah. Okay, and this church is also known for something else, which is contributions from different countries depicting Mary, so honoring Mary. And so the one from the United States is on the left, and it's this kind of metallic image of Mary that's literally three-dimensional, is jutting out of the rest of the print. And on the right is from Japan. And so just wonderful, but from all kinds of countries, they're different. And these are huge. They're like maybe 10 feet tall or something. I don't know. I mean, they're huge. And they're all along the walls of the church and outside.
The Japan version, Mary and baby Jesus are Japanese, right? They look very Japanese.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I think it's great how it depicts, different countries, different cultures. Okay, so day 7, we're making our way down from the north, from around Galilee, the Sea of Galilee, and we were supposed to go to Nablus. And Nablus is it on here?
Jacob's Well.
What?
Jacob's Well.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you, right there. Which, of course, is from John 4, the woman at the well, right? That's where that story happens. We were supposed to go there, and then Eod got a phone call from some his people on the ground there saying, you better drive around, don't come here. Something might have been going on there. So he's very good at keeping us safe and making sure we only go to sites that are appropriate at the time. So we made our way down, and then we ended up at a village called Taipei, which is encircled there inside the red circle. And two things of note. Three things of note. One is it's mentioned in the Gospels as it's called, I'm spacing now. Do you guys know, either Bob or David, the alternative name?
I'm working on it.
Okay. It wasn't called Taipei, it was something else. But it says that Jesus stopped there on the way to Jerusalem with his disciples. But another distinction is that the claim is that it's the only 100% Christian town or village in the Holy Land. The third distinction is that there's an amazing brewery there. The beer is to die for. These brothers were doing some graduate studies, these Palestinian brothers doing graduate studies in Boston, and loved the beer there and heard about it, and they decided to see if they can make their own beer, and they brought the secret of that back and then developed their own. And now they sell wine and other things too. anyhow, but we had to stop there. We stopped there for a while.
So this church was actually on the way before we got to
Right.
Taipei. It's called Burkina. And this was the site of where the 10 lepers came and Jesus healed them. And only one came back to thank him.
A Samaritan.
Yes.
The others were Jewish. He was the only
The-
Samaritan. Yeah.
10 lepers, only one shows up to give him thanks. It's a beautiful little, it was Maronite, or I don't think it was Latin, it might have been Greek, Orthodox.
My guess is it is. Yeah, by the iconography, it looks Orthodox of some
Yeah,
sort.
beautiful church.
Yeah.
St. George's is the patron saint of the Palestinians.
Yes, of the Anglican Church.
Do you know
Palestine.
why that is?
It might, well, in part, it might be because of the British occupation of Palestine in the 20s and so forth. And St. George is the symbol of England, right? So there's that connection.
Look where Ron has his arm. He's holding that there.
Sorry, Ron, you can't take it all with you.
That's my purchase right there.
I brought back this, and Ron's got the photo up there. So the peace stuff. And got it there. And, it's just reminds us to keep praying for peace for the Middle East and particularly the Holy Land. But this is where we got it.
A Latin priest started this thing to provide jobs for Palestinians. Yes, and they make two sizes, and you can go online and order them. There's a smaller size and that larger size. And if you put in Taipei peace doves, there's a website, and you can order them online and have them shipped to you.
Yeah.
It comes with oil and with wicks to
Right.
put in there, and Susan and I have one at home we use all the time.
Yeah. Busaka there, okay. All right, day 8, so to Bethlehem. So down where the circle is. Bethlehem is only about 6 miles south of Jerusalem, so it's very close to Jerusalem. And of course, the Church of the Nativity is there, where Jesus was born. This whole, again, something, probably founded by Constantine's mother, Helena, in the early 300s. And of course, it's been added to and built upon since then. But what's striking about it is you go in and there's this large, as you can see, very large church, nave and so forth. And then after a while, you go down some narrow stairs. So as David had said, when you go, quoting Eod, when you go down, that's when you see the older things. And so here we go.
I'm being good, Mark. I hope you said it at home.
So going down. And where we're going is the actual spot where Jesus was born.
But I think this was just entering into the church, which I thought was kind of interesting because the door is so short.
So this is the main, when you first enter, and then you go down later on. And again, very ornate, kind of that Eastern Orthodox perspective. Lots of mosaics. Here we go. So we went down some very narrow steps and came to this point. And so on the right there, where the people are looking in, that's the spot. And I think Jan on the left, on the bottom left, is also at the spot too. And you go, and again, it's kind of like the top of the Mount Calvary and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You touch a spot, there's a hole there, and that's where it was a cave back then, right? And in the biblical narratives, where animals were stored to keep them safe and so forth. And so it's not this wooden structure that you imagine a stable to be. But again, try to imagine a cave here, you know, dirt and so forth.
Good.
Okay, here's the wall. So remember we referred to the wall earlier. Yeah, look, I thought that's an interesting quote there. Even though they show Morgan Freeman, who depicted Nelson Mandela in a movie, but they're quoting Nelson Mandela. We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. And that was a South African Nelson Mandela saying that. Okay, there's our map of the old city again. So we go into Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. You'll see pictures of the Western Wall, Dome of the Rock, St. Anne's Church, and the Pools of Bethesda, Israel Museum. Okay, there's the Western Wall. On top of that was where the temple was, the temple of, not Solomon's temple, that was destroyed back in time by the Babylonians, but it was rebuilt over time, and then especially in Herod the Great's time, when around the time of Jesus being born, he added to that temple a lot. So some people call it the third temple, some say the second, because he just added on to what was originally there. But the point being is the wall is the only thing left of that area, and even that was not really a wall of the temple. That's a retaining wall to keep the land up upon which the temple was built. So that's what that is. And you see the separation there. There's some canopies, white canopies separating out, and a little fence. On the left side was where men could go, men and boys. On the right side, women and girls. And when you approach, you had to have your head covered. So they had got paper kippas there to cover our heads. Paper as well as cloth. And then afterwards, we got to go to the top. There's a ramp, a covered ramp, and you have to go through Israeli security first at the bottom of the ramp. And then you go to the top, and then you have Palestinian Authority people at the top. But this is the Temple Mount. This is the Temple Mount. What you're seeing is that those pictures of this gorgeous building, that's the Dome of the Rock, the third holiest site in Islam in the world, and the holiest site outside of Saudi Arabia in the world for Muslims. And so they think it was built right on top of the place where the temple used to be, the Jewish temple used to be, and especially the Holy of Holies.
And this is the site where Muslim piety says Muhammad made his night journey from this site, also considered to be the site of Mount Moriah, where
Right.
Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. So there's all kinds
Yeah,
of
it traces back to Abraham onwards. Yeah,
stuff going on here
right.
in this time.
So the whole time that we were in Israel, men and women, we were very respectful of wearing our scarves, keeping the arms covered, not wearing shorts. And so when we visited this site, I thought I was kosher. Well, I wasn't. I was wearing a dress, and I was wearing a scarf, and I had the scarf all kind of tucked in the neck, and I had this long dress, and it was almost to the ground. But I had forgotten that there was a little slit in the dress. And so everybody else was walking ahead, and I just kind of paused and looked. I mean, this building is beautiful. So I just kind of stopped and looked, and the wind blew my skirt.
Uh-huh.
So this man came up to me and started yelling at me. And I didn't know kind of what he was saying. And he held up this skirt. It was just an elastic waist, green, and then a yellow stripe, Palestinian colors, right? man came running up, and the guy, and she started trying to fix the skirt. She's trying to put the scarf back on, and he looks at me and goes, "Cover that up." And everybody here's family, right? So I said, "Sir, I have breasts." And right then I thought, I'm in trouble. I'm going to be arrested. So I'm hiking my, top back up. Three of them looked at me, turned, and walked away. So I was safe.
You wonder why the war started.
But seriously, this area is so sensitive to the Muslims and the Christians.
This is the
and
epicenter of the world. I mean, think about it.
And it's controlled by the Muslims, right? So
At the very top, yeah.
So Jewish people are not allowed to pray here.
No,
So
they can't.
you're allowed to enter but not pray. And I thought that was interesting. And so if you really wanted to piss off the Palestinians, you would, a Jewish person would come here and pray.
It was very interesting that it was Israeli soldiers that you had to go through the checkpoint,
At
because
the bottom.
they are aware that and there's a politician there who just previous to when we were there would boldly take him and a bunch of his staff, and they would just go marching up and go marching in there, and this was causing a lot of upset in the community that controlled the Dome of the Rock, because he was brazenly sort of baiting them and trying to push them into. So at one point, Iyad, our guide, said to us in one thing, he said, another intifada is coming. We don't know when, but
A war.
another war is coming. It's just everything is such a powder keg there.
And at this point, it's like 9 days before
Yeah.
the Hamas, the Gaza war happened.
And it wasn't just me also. After all of this drama happened and I rejoined the group, I happened to look over.
And here was this teenage boy wearing the skirt. He forgot he was in shorts, and they made him wear the skirt.
Oh, so they weren't just singling you out, right? Okay. Oh, there's us. There's there's the gorgeous Dome of the Rock. Okay, so we went northwards from the Temple Mount, so it came out again into the Old City, to St. Anne's Church, St. Anne's being Mary's mother. Somebody the other day, or was it Bob? Was it you, Bob? There was a nickname?
Yeah, the local people call it Granny Annie's Church.
Mother of Mary, grandmother of Jesus. So, yeah, Granny Annie's Church. But wonderful acoustics, you'll hear.
Something about that church is that every group that goes in there sings, because the acoustics in that church is amazing.
Mhm.
So I've been there before, and it is that every group goes in there and sings, and you can't believe it. And we were very lucky to have Mark Hayworth with us, who got us to sing all the time.
Yeah. Now we're at the pools of Bethesda. And this is where, remember that story from John where there's this guy who'd been paralyzed, I believe, for 38 years. And he tried to make his way to the pools. This was full of water back then, and make his way there because the legend was that angels would, when they stir the water, the first person to touch the water would then get healed. And so he kept trying, and people were beating him to it. And so Jesus met him and healed him there. But we also had a healing service, and so and David and Susan led that, and that was a wonderful moment as well, I thought. You want to say anything about that? Oh, sure. I kept hitting it, that's why I was...
Okay. No, this was a wonderful place to just pause and reflect upon Jesus' healing ministry and to pray for healing. And so we had a healing service right about in the middle of that picture on the right there.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful time.
Okay, day 10. So Gethsemane, Church of All Nations, and St. Peter of Gallicantu. So we started out, again, from where we were staying. Remember, just kind of picture, just north of beyond where the wall is. We were kind of just off screen, as it were. So we took the coach, took the bus, went to the right toward the east.
You want to point over on this one?
Oh.
It would be a little easier to see up on the screen. Over here,
Oh,
over here.
Well, now I can't be by the mic. I can do it, I guess. Okay, so, we're staying up here. We're back at the cathedral, right? So we came back down, we're back at the cathedral. So we're staying up there. Took the coach and drove over to here on the right side. So you've got the Mount of Olives right here. And so we all know a lot about the Mount of Olives, especially, Thursday night, Maundy Thursday, and Jesus, not temptation, but his trial of, he didn't really want to go through with having to offer his life, but he does. And he's with his disciples. But that's where that happened. You see, it's right by Jerusalem. I mean, it's right there. You just go downhill and then come back uphill and you're in Jerusalem. So a lot of the places that we were going to were centered here. One of them being the Church of All Nations. There's the Teardrop Church, which overlooks the old city. They've got a clear window that looks out right onto the Dome of the Rock and the rest of the city. And they think that's where Jesus was when he cried over Jerusalem. He said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you persecute the prophets and you don't accept people who speak the word of God," essentially. And so he might have been looking out at that point, so they built a church there. But there's Mary Magdalene Church, and then Church of All Nations ought to be down here somewhere, right? Where is it? Here? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
This, by the way, is the Kidron Valley.
Yes.
You hear about in Scripture.
Yep. Jerusalem's built on a mountain, Mount Moriah, but it's surrounded on three sides by valleys, which makes it easily defendable, or easier to defend, and harder for enemies to attack, except from the north.
It's a good long driver shot from this church across the Kidron Valley to the walls of Jerusalem. It's not very far.
Yeah. So there's the front of the Church of All Nations. Isn't it gorgeous? Look at that. And there's on the left, that's the olive area where Jesus would have been and his disciples that Thursday night. Some of those trees are 2,000 years old. So some of those trees would have been around when Jesus was with his disciples about to be arrested.
You think that gate might have been where Jesus walked through?
Oh, the path there?
The gate?
Well, yeah, there probably was a path through there. Yeah, probably so. Yeah. So there it is. See the olive trees there, and there's a depiction of Jesus on the top there, praying. Kind of like, look, our window there. You see that? It's inside the church. Again, a characteristic of some of the churches over there is if they're built, especially if they're built on a mountain or something like that, is they'll have the tip of the mountain just kind of punctuating its way up into the floor. And here's an example of that. So they reckon they preserved the rocky area of the time, and they reckon that that's where Jesus was when he was praying to God. And so they preserved that, and then of course built the church around it and the altar behind it and so forth. Ron, you want to say something about that right depiction especially? The picture on the right? You want to say something about that? There was something you said the other day.
Well, just that the mosaics in this church were contributed by various nations from around the world, and we found the one from the United States. It's pretty obvious by the...
See the symbolism inside the tree there?
By the eagle.
Okay, so this is St. Peter of Gallicantu. This is now we've traveled from the Mount of Olives and around the Kidron, or kind of through the Kidron Valley, as it were. We're now, this is like southwest of the old city, just southwest of the old city. Probably where Caiaphas' palace was, who, remember, he was the high priest of the temple. And so when Jesus was arrested on the Mount of Olives, he was taken to Caiaphas' house and then later to Pontius Pilate's place as well. But it would have been quite a trek for somebody under arrest and so forth to have gone in the middle of the night. So anyhow, so again, built on kind of a hill as well.
It's Gallicantu is a rooster, you know, the cock crowing.
Right, right.
St. Peter in Gallicantu is where St. Peter betrayed Jesus after the cock crowed.
See the weather vane on top?
Yeah.
Like around here, all these chickens.
You can see on the door on the left there, the doors have engraving in them where Peter on the right is looking aghast because somebody's accusing him, and he's saying, no, no, no. And that's the dome of that church. It was extremely beautiful.
Well, look at that photo on the right, too, how the church is built and kind of enmeshed into the stonework. You see that? Isn't it amazing?
This church was actually built by a New England couple.
Oh, really?
In the 1970s or something like that. They paid to have that church built.
Wow. On the left is, we think most likely the pathway that Jesus would have, under arrest, he would have been brought under arrest, would have had to come up that pathway from the Mount of Olives. And there's a little, again, we've got a little bit of a cave action going on here in the basement, probably where Jesus was held captive, so they would lower him into there, and he was held captive there and for the night.
The ropes on the right, in that lower right-hand picture would have been where hands would have been tied up and a prisoner would have been held.
Right. Wow. Okay, Palm Sunday walk on Mount of Olives. So this is, so earlier in the day, before we got to St. Peter of Gallicantu, we were here, back at the Mount of Olives, where the Church of All Nations was. And you'll see on the bottom left is what's called the Golden Gate, not the bridge that we know now, but this is the eastern gate to get into the old city. Again, that gate would have been built, that's Suleiman's time in the 1500s. But it's predicted, I think, in Zechariah, that the Messiah would appear on a donkey, would be coming through that gate. And so when Jesus does that, it's a real statement. I mean, it's not just he's enjoying himself on Palm Sunday or whatever. It's a real statement of, this is who I am. You know, I'm the one you've been waiting for. And then on the right, on the bottom, remember I said before about how a lot of burials were in caves. They couldn't dig up the ground and bury somebody because the ground is too hard. Another method would have been to have above ground graves, and that's what you see there. And so these are Jewish graves. People will place stones on top of each grave as a marker of respect. Okay, day 10, so the Dead Sea. So this is the day where we make our way. Again, you see the left circle is Jerusalem. The right circle is Jericho and the beginning of the Dead Sea. Of course, Jericho is the lowest inhabited city on earth. I think it's around 1,500 to 2,000 feet below sea level at that point. Jerusalem's around 2,500 feet above sea level, I think. So it's quite a difference in elevation, first of all. And of course, secondly, is the longest continuously inhabited city in the world, 10,000 years. Their record is from 8,000 BCE. But yeah, we're making our way to the Dead Sea. So we get to the Dead Sea. Lowest, look at that, the sign on the top left there. The lowest place on earth. Literally. And of course with the Dead Sea, the salinity is so thick, I mean, it's even beyond Salt Lake in Utah. First of all, don't have a cut on your body at all. It's going to sting you like crazy. But you go in and you're really not supposed to swim. Swimming can be dangerous because you can get the water in your mouth and that can make you sick and so forth. So just float. So you're going to see this. Cece's floating already. Jan's in the foreground getting ready to float. Is that Faith? Is that you as well? Okay.
Yeah, I got you.
Is that Bob back there too, floating?
Okay, gotcha.
Yay!
You're not even getting your hair wet.
Not even getting the hair wet. Look at that.
It was hot.
It was hot. End of September, but hot. So the water is warm too as a result. Cece's really out. Okay, so there's our map again, Old City. So the depiction is Jerusalem, Stations of the Cross. So this is the day that we actually fly back. This is a Saturday. And so most of us got up very early in the morning, and because that's the best way to get into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre without a lot of crowds, and even to walk the Via Dolorosa, because nowadays the Via Dolorosa, the path that Jesus would have taken, it's probably about 10 feet higher than he walked because of accretions of sediment and all that over time. But then secondly, it's now you have a bunch of shops along there. And so a way to get through that before they open up is to do your walk. But you can imagine, even with the shops open, how in some ways that would have fit, the aura, the ambiance of that would have fit what Jesus must have experienced carrying the cross with all the people, meanwhile doing business with their wares around him and everything. And here's this guy, is a criminal, being led, having to carry a cross. But so this is the morning, it's Saturday morning, so it's dark, still, dark 30. And we're making our way, and there are 14 stations of the cross. Many of you may know that already. Each one is depicted with a Roman numeral somewhere on a wall or above a doorway or something. And so when you get to that point, you're supposed to stop, and we had booklets, and so there's a set of readings and prayers for each numbered stop, and so that's what we were doing. We were taking turns reading and so forth. Okay, first of all, you see Faith there carrying the cross. We took turns doing that. And there's Ron over there on the top right also carrying the cross. There was a gentleman, we had stopped there. There's our guide in the big picture with the blue shirt, his back toward us, that's Iyad. And we're having a moment there. And then there's a gentleman, let me just stand down here for a minute. This photo here, look way back in the background. See that? Way in the background, the guy in the white there, see that? That's this guy. And he was making his way, and he was barefoot, had a staff in his hand, a robe, and beard and everything. He looked like you imagine Jesus would. And so it was a little unnerving. I looked over there, we were doing this holy thing, and all of a sudden here's this guy, and I wonder if this is an angel appearing, or Jesus, visiting us or something. Who knows? Wild things can happen in the Holy Land. And he made his way this direction, which is where this archway is, and that's the entranceway to the courtyard to get into the Holy Sepulchre, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. But I was just struck by that moment. We were there worshiping, praying, and so forth, and then here's this guy. Oh, wow, this is a moment.
Yeah, I took that picture of him walking behind us, and I thought, that could be Jesus.
Me too. I thought maybe we're having a visitation here.
Turns out there was an article in Yahoo News about this guy. He's from Michigan.
The other Holy Land, right?
But he's devoted his life to Jesus, and he lives like Jesus, and he probably walks this path every day.
He's literally walking in the footsteps of Jesus, literally.
Yeah, it's his thing.
I mean, yeah. Trying to be like Jesus. So the last 4 stations of the cross are in the Holy Sepulchre itself. So, of course, one of them being, again, see that bottom left picture? Remember I told you we went up these narrow stone steps to get to the top of where Jesus' cross would have been put into Mount Calvary. And so that's one of the stations of the cross. So, and then, of course, on the bottom right, you see the picture there of the Episcopal. that little building within a building where the tomb would have been. And these are the folks from this church here. For the most, yeah, so there we are. We had 37 pilgrims, out of which I think about 19 of them, 18 or 19 are from here. Look at that wonderful photo there, both of them. Ron, again, thank you so much. What an amazing job. Any closing comments or questions?
Jesus would have walked, there was a Roman road there. It struck me that Jesus said, even if the people didn't cry out, the very stones, and he would have pointed up where we were, the very stones would have cried out. And I couldn't help but think, we're the stones.
Yes.
We're the stones crying out, Lord Jesus. And so let it be a prayer of our hearts.
Yeah.
Peace in Jerusalem and the whole world. But really the only way we're going to get it is come, Lord Jesus, come.
Yeah. Divine intervention. Absolutely. Well, if not, well, thank anybody else. I don't want to cut anybody else. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming and a wonderful time of fellowship together.
I would just like
thank
to
you, Jan, for the live stream as well.
I'd like to thank Kahu for organizing.
Oh, thank you.
this.
We appreciate it. Thank you. It's a wonderful group, really wonderful group.
Sorry for all the pictures of me and my mother-in-law.
You got to feature our favorite photo. Come on.